Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Jazakallah for having me on, and Jazakallah khair to Sheikh for the deep dive into Islamic finance. Just give me a minute while I share my screen. Is that visible?
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. 1 second. Okay. So Halal Investing 101. So a bit about myself. I studied a bachelor's of mechatronic engineering. Um, I did engineering at university, but never really worked as an engineer, and kind of made the switch to finance. So after I completed my mechatronic engineering degree, I then started Muslim investing, which is where I help people learn about Islamic finance and halal investing. So the reason for that was while I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do after my engineering degree, I came across investing and was really interested in how the concept of making money and growing my wealth was. And there wasn't that much information out there on how to do that in a halal way. So I did a bunch of research, spoke to a bunch of sheikhs and different people in the space, and started Muslim Investing, which at the moment is a social media. It's on Instagram as well as TikTok and other social media platforms where I share content and educational piece of information on the subject. So after that, I officially switched to finance and did a Master of Applied Finance at AUT. And whilst running Muslim Investing on the side, I partnered with a bunch of Islamic fintechs, which are companies in the space who had started Islamic finance startups, things like that. And one of the companies I partnered with was a company called Zoya, which is a halal stock screener, as Sheikh mentioned, um, is an app that allows you to screen for halal stocks in a much easier way, just on an app without having to manually um, kind of figure out what's halal and what isn't. And I've since left Zoya and I'm now full time with Muslim Investing. So, what is investing? Investing, it's when you buy assets that earn income or grow in value. So the idea is that you want to buy assets that eventually allow you to grow your wealth. Um, and the idea is also that you want to allow you want to make your money work for you to achieve your financial goals. Um, and so there's a difference between investing and trading. So with investing, you are buying assets and investments that over the long term will hopefully grow in value, whereas trading, it's more short-term based and you're buying assets in the short term without, um, sorry, 1 second. Trading is more short-term. You're based on not so much the asset, but in the short term, buying it based on charts and technical fluctuations in the pricing. Sorry. So you may be wondering whether investing is right for you. So a lot of the advice when it comes to investing in finance is that you should be saving. So there's a difference between saving and investing. Saving is great for short-term goals, such as if you want to save up for a car or short-term other goals like that. Whereas investing is if you want to um, grow your wealth for a long time. For example, if you're planning to retire or um,
I think Muhammad has just exited the chat by mistake, so bear with us. George,
Yes.
can you see Muhammad anywhere?
I think his computer may have died because or something because it just came up. Oh, here
Oh,
we
yeah,
go. Here we go.
here he is.
Chat.
All right, team. Well, we'll get back into it. Is he there? Yeah, he's back, guys. George, you need to make him a co-host. Jazakallah kul khair.
Sorry, apologies for that. Just give me one minute. Okay, so where are we? So you've got saving and investing. So a lot of the advice is saving is a good way of preserving your wealth over the long term. However, there are three reasons why investing is a lot more beneficial. So one of those reasons is inflation. So inflation is the rise of prices and goods and services. So for example, say 10 years ago, $100 when you went to the grocery store, you could buy a bunch of things. If you were to use that same $100 today, you wouldn't be able to buy the same amount of things for that same price. So the idea is that inflation is when, so every year, about 2 to 3% of your wealth devalues. So what you can buy today for $100 versus in 10 years, 15 years time, you won't be able to buy the same amount of thing. So your money won't be, if you had left it just in cash, $100 today won't be able to buy you the same thing that $100 will in the future. So to combat that, investing allows you to grow your wealth to kind of beat inflation, to beat that 2 to 3%, so that you can preserve your wealth and grow it for the future. Another reason why you would invest is because of zakat. So idle wealth that sits in our bank accounts or in cash is subject to zakat. So as Muslims, we pay 2.5% of zakat on our wealth. So automatically every year, 2.5% of our wealth is given to zakat. So another reason why you would invest is to grow your wealth past that 2.5%, to be able to kind of cover that 2.5%, but also then to be able to give more zakat. And another reason why you would want to invest is because as Muslims, we can't deal in interest. So in a typical conventional savings account, you would earn interest on money that sits in the bank account. However, as Muslims, we can't do that. There are in some countries a Sharia compliant savings account, which allows you to earn a profit on the money that sits in your bank account. However, for those in New Zealand, as we know, that isn't an option. And so that is another reason why we should be investing. And so is investing right for you? Another thing to do before you start investing is you may want to consider saving up an emergency fund. So an emergency fund can consist of 3 to 6 months of expenses. So the idea is that if you're investing, for example, and you're consistently investing, but you don't have a bunch of money set aside for, say, for example, if your car breaks down or you suddenly need to buy a new laptop or something like that, the last thing you want to be doing is selling your investments to cover those costs. So it's good to have at least 3 months of your expenses. So whatever it costs you for your bills and expenses for those 3 months, to have that set aside so that when you start investing, you don't need to sell your investments because investments can fluctuate. It can go up and down. And if your investments are currently down, you don't want to be selling those investments to be able to pay off a new laptop, for example. And then you also have debts. So as Muslims, we want to steer away from debts. So debts can be credit card debt, you've got student loans and other things like that. So the idea is you kind of want to get rid of those debts before you start investing. However, student debt is probably one of those debts that, especially for a lot of students, that kind of debt is paid off as you kind of start working. However, credit card debt and high interest debts where you're paying interest on your money when whereas you should really be focusing on trying to pay that off first before you start investing. These are some common investing myths. So the first one is you need hundreds or even thousands of dollars to start investing. So a lot of people think that only those who have a ton of money or loads of savings can invest. The reality is with platforms like Sharesies or Stake or other platforms available around the world, you can start investing with literally just $1. So you, as a student, you don't need a ton of money to start investing. In fact, investing small amounts regularly can create a consistent habit of investing, so that when you do start earning more money, you already have a habit of setting aside money for your future self. The second myth is you need to save up to buy a whole share. So back in the day, it would be that in an investment platform, you would need to, say, for example, you have a share that's worth $500. You would need to first save up $500 to be able to afford that share. But a lot of the investment platforms today allow you to buy fractional shares. What that means is you can buy 5% of $500 of a share, and then you can keep adding to that, and over time you eventually purchase a whole share. The third myth is you need to be an expert or hire an expert to manage your money. That is far from the truth. The investing world can seem complex, and financial advisors and things like that you wouldn't have business if people thought that they could just invest their money themselves. So the investing world is made to seem complex, but the reality is you can invest in low cost ETFs and kind of do it yourself. I'll be touching on ETFs in a future slide. And the fourth myth is investing is gambling. So a lot of people equate investing to gambling, in that they're just both as risky. You're putting money in, you're not really sure if it's going to do perform, if it's going to grow in value, or if it's going to lose value. However, the difference between investing and gambling is that investing requires some due diligence, some research. There's a real asset behind it. It's not just pure luck. You'll be doing research on the investment to see whether you believe it will grow in value. Whereas with gambling, you're just putting in money and with the hopes that it will grow in value, but not really based on anything you're actually doing. And the fifth investing myth is investing is a get rich quick scheme. As Sheikh mentioned as well, investing requires a lot of like research and things like that, and it's not just gonna make you money overnight. In fact, investing is a great way to build wealth long term, so that it takes a little while. It's not just, you're not suddenly just gonna earn a bunch of money, especially when you're looking at halal investing. The last thing you want to be doing is just investing in the latest crypto or the latest investment just because someone told you it's a good investment. What you want to be doing is doing some due diligence, doing some research, seeing if you really believe it's going to grow in value, and that's what you kind of need to be doing when it comes to investing. So what makes an investment halal? Again, Sheikh touched on this, so I'll just briefly go over this. So we have Sharia standards. Sharia standards are the standards in which scholars have kind of agreed to determine what makes an investment halal. So it's kind of split into two categories. You've got business screening. So that avoids companies that invest in alcohol, pork, gambling, weapons, etc. A lot of people stop here when it comes to Sharia standards. They kind of understand the business screening, and they kind of think, so long as I'm not investing in an alcohol company or a bank, the investment's halal. However, there's another level to Sharia standards and to halal investing, and that includes financial screening. So the main financial screening is the 5% impermissible revenue threshold. So scholars have understood that it's difficult to find a company that completely steers away from any form of interest, any form of haram revenue. For example, big companies like Apple, Microsoft, they'll have a portion of their wealth sitting in a bank earning interest. However, what they have said is that 5% is the maximum allowance for this threshold, so that it allows Muslims to invest in a wider range of companies. And similarly, there's a 30% debt threshold, which again allows you to invest in companies that have debt less than 30%. So how can you find halal stocks? So there's three ways you can find halal stocks. The first one is to do it yourself. So that would mean looking through financial reports, balance statements, and really doing a deep dive into each company individually, each investment, and determining based on the criteria I mentioned previously, whether or not an investment is halal. The reality is this would take a very, very long time to do this manually for every single investment. So that is why there is option 2, which is a halal stock screener, which is an app or a platform that allows you to filter through stocks and gives you a pass or a fail on the Sharia compliance. So one of a halal stock screener that I use and recommend is Zoya, which also happens to be the company I used to work for. Another one is Musafa, and there are quite a few different halal stock screeners available that allow you to quickly determine whether or not an investment is halal. And the third option is to use a halal ETF. So an ETF is a basket of investments. So, for example, if you invest in, you may have heard of the S&P 500, which is made up of the top 500 US companies. So an ETF allows you to invest in all of those companies at the same time. So there are halal ETFs, which only are made up of just halal companies. So what you can do is you can look at the list of those companies, and then you have a quick way of determining whether a stock is halal or not. So these are some halal investment options. So we have stocks. So again, you're using a halal stock screener to kind of determine whether or not those stocks are halal. You've got ETFs, which I mentioned earlier, are made up of a variety of stocks. Another benefit to ETFs is they allow you to first invest in a range of stocks at the same time. So, for example, you have different industries of investments and things like that. So if a few companies were to go down, the idea is with investing in an ETF, they won't all go down at the same time. So you get a bigger diversification, and there's a better management of risk when it comes to investments. The third option is sukuk, which is a halal alternative to bonds. So bonds are instruments that pay you interest, which are not halal. Sukuk are asset-backed investments that pay you a profit. The fourth halal investment option is gold or silver. So you can invest in physical gold or silver through jewelry or a gold bullion or a gold coin, and you also have the option of gold or silver ETFs, which allow you to invest in a portion of gold or silver digitally in an ETF format. And the last option is real estate, which is investing in property and the likes. So when it comes to investing, there are it can seem quite complex, and there can be you might not know which investments to start with. There's a bunch of different options. So what I typically recommend is to look at these two main strategies that I've got here. So the first one is the core satellite strategy, which how it works is you invest 80 to 90% of your investments in low cost investments. So this could be made up of ETFs, gold, and other stable investments. So you're not thinking so much about actively managing your investments. And then the remaining 10 to 20% of your investments could be in individual stocks or higher risk investments, or things that you have a bit more interest in. So when it comes to picking individual stocks, what I typically recommend is first looking at companies that you understand, and companies, maybe brands that you use. For example, if you have an Apple iPhone or a Microsoft, you're using Microsoft software, those are probably good places to start because you already use those products and you have a better understanding of what those companies do. Obviously, that would be the first point of call of looking for individual stocks. Then we'd be looking at whether those stocks are halal, and then doing a bit more research in terms of whether you believe those stocks or investments would do well long term. So the idea with the core satellite strategy is that most of your investments are in a diverse range of assets. So you're not worrying too much about the performance, and you're not looking at the latest news all the time. That is just kept for about 10 to 20% of your investment portfolio. And the second strategy is the dollar cost averaging strategy. So when it comes to investments, it can be difficult to, so once, say, for example, you have decided which investments you're going to invest in, you're going to invest in company A, B, and C, then the next struggle can be, when is a good time to buy company A, B, and C? Is the market down? Is the market up? It can be quite overwhelming in terms of deciding when to invest in those investments. So the dollar cost averaging strategy kind of mitigates this. So how it works is, say, for example, you want to invest in company A. So what you would do is then invest the same amount at the same time. So let's say you invest $50 in company A every month for the next 2 years. So regardless of the price, whether the price is up or down, you invest the same amount, same $50 every single month. You invest the same amount every single month, and the idea is that over time you are getting an average price for the investment over that 2-year period. So you don't have to worry about what the market's doing. You just focus on your strategy and you invest the same amount every single month. So how can you get started? When it comes to investing, there are a bunch of different investment brokers. These are 2 available brokers in New Zealand. So you have Sharesies, who allow you to invest in the US, the Australia, and the New Zealand stock markets. And you also have Stake, which allow you to invest in the US and AU stock markets. So when it comes to deciding which investment broker to use, there are a few things to keep in mind. You have fees, so whether or not the investment broker charges you money to deposit money into the investment brokerage or withdraw that money, and then management fees for investments. So in some investments charge you, say, like a 0.5% fee every year to manage your investments. That's something you may want to look into when it comes to deciding which broker to use. Another thing to keep in mind is our account minimums. So some investment brokers require you to start investing with $50, could be $100. However, the ones I mentioned above have very low investment minimums. Another thing to keep in mind are the types of investment options available for the broker. So, if you want to invest in stocks, ETFs, gold, depending on what options you want to invest in, different brokers have different options that you can pick which investment options you want to use. So keeping that in mind when it comes to investment broker is really helpful. And the last thing to think about is fractional investing. So we mentioned this earlier. This allows you to buy more expensive stocks and purchase 0.5% of it, 5%, 10% of the stock price, as opposed to having to save up and pay for it in one go. So this is just this is what it looked like if you were to invest with Sharesies, for example. So this is the explore page, which you can search different stocks and you get to choose which investments you want to go for. The next step would, let's say, example, we pick Apple to invest in. This is what the page would look like. It shows you at the top here $182, which is the current price of Apple. And then you would click on buy, and then you get to choose between a market buy and a limit buy. A market buy lets you let the market decide the price you want to pay for shares. So basically, whatever the price of the stock is at the time, you would be purchasing at that price. And then a limit buy allows you to set the highest price you're willing to pay per share. So, for example, we saw it with $182. If you think the price is going to drop to $180, you set that you only want to buy shares $180, then it would only purchase at that price. But let's say we go with a market buy for this scenario, and then we say we want to invest $5 in Apple, and then you go ahead and then you just review and confirm your order here. It shows here a transaction fee, and then that's it. You're now an investor. And if you're looking to sign up with Sharesies, there's a code here on the screen which allows you to get $5 when you sign up. And if you're interested in learning more about Islamic finance and halal investing, this is my Instagram and TikTok page, which I go over a lot of content on the different types of investing options and other things in the space. And if anyone has any questions.
Jazakallah khair, Muhammad. That was really, really insightful. And thank you for investing that $5 for us to show us how it's done. Much appreciated. We do have a question in the chat box. How do you approach building an investment portfolio that adheres to Islamic principles, considering both individual halal stocks and halal ETFs?
Okay, let me just read that again. So like I mentioned with the core satellite strategy, which I would then use that 80% of the core part of the investment to look into a few halal ETFs. So there are a number of different options when it comes to halal ETFs. So I mentioned that you have the S&P 500, which is made up of the top 500 US companies. However, not all of those 500 companies are halal. So there are ETFs. Take those top 500 and filter out any haram ones. So I would look into an ETF like that and make 80% of my portfolio a mixture of ETFs that are halal, and then the remaining 10-20% of individual stocks. In terms of criteria to evaluate the Sharia compliance, there are a number of different
George, is
popular
Muhammad for you?
the same methodology. So that's what I do.
Sorry, Muhammad, you froze for a little bit. If you could please just re-answer that question, that would be great.
Okay, sure. So yeah, when it comes to deciding what to include in an investment portfolio, I typically do recommend the core satellite strategy, which is the 80-20 split when it comes to ETFs and individual stocks. And what criteria I use the same AOFI criteria, which is the most popular when it comes to Sharia compliance. In other words, the halal stock screening that are available, a lot of them use the same standard. Allows you to kind of determine whether a stock is halal or not. I'll share them on the chat a bit later on.
Awesome. Jazakallah kul khair. All right. Our next question. Is there any halal property investment in New Zealand that does not involve riba? I'm not too sure if that falls within your expertise.
That's a good question. It doesn't exactly fall in my expertise, but there aren't any that I'm aware of at the moment in New Zealand. So I would probably say no, just based on the information I have at the moment.
Yes, actually, yesterday when we had our professional networking event, we did have someone talk about property development. There isn't a fully compliant halal property investment in New Zealand. However, there are things like crowdfunding, and there's this financial service called Sharif. Yeah, Sharif Financial Services, and I think that's how they do the crowdfunding and buy property. Okay, if you could please also share the code again with people, Muhammad, that would be much appreciated. About the $5 Sharesies one. Our next question is how to diversify investments as a halal investor, since most Sharia compliant ETFs invest in IT and healthcare.
That is a good question. That is true that most ETFs are in IT and healthcare. What I would do is also then look at individual stocks and include those as part of my portfolio. And also things like gold and silver to kind of balance that out. So the risk is not all just in one sector. Because, for example, during COVID, things like airlines and hospitality, that whole sector was down just because of COVID. So you don't want to have all your investments in one type of sector. Just in case that, again, you ideally want to have it in
Sorry, Muhammad, the
range of
connection
different
is not
sectors
that
and
good.
localities. So, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes. Sorry, the
Sorry.
connection just keeps connecting and disconnecting.
Sorry. Yeah, so ETFs, I would also include individuals and halal stock screener to determine which ones are halal and include those in my portfolio.
Awesome. I have a question. When you're looking into a stock, what are some sort of key indicators that you look at? So, for instance, one of the things that were mentioned is the debt to equity ratio. But what are some things that we should be looking at before investing to make sure that our investment is obviously halal, but also profitable?
That is a very good question. So what I typically recommend is, like I mentioned earlier, first looking at companies that use or understand. Um, that's like the initial stage of looking at investments. So I use an iPhone, Apple. I understand what Apple does, and then I'll be looking at what their plans are in terms of going ahead, whether I feel that it's a company that is going to be around for a long time, what kind of how many people are investing in that company. Uh, there's a few different ratios you can look at financially to see whether those companies are doing well, and then taking it from there.
Are there any things in terms of their financial accounts that we should be looking for?
You can do. It can get quite complex if you start looking at all the different financial statements and things like that. Hence, when it comes to starting out with investing, investing most of your wealth in an ETF kind of covers that basis. But you can definitely look into those financial statements and see the different options, different things, and then work off that. But I would still keep most of my investments in ETFs just to balance out that diversity.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So we have another question. So do Zoya and the other app, which is Musafa, help us with halal ETFs?
Yes, they do. You can screen for normal ETFs and they'll tell you whether those are halal. But they also list a bunch of halal ETFs on there as well, which just make it a lot easier to start investing.
Can you invest?
So they are mainly screening apps, but they have started allowing investments on those platforms. However, I'm not sure they're available for New Zealand just yet. So what I would recommend if you want to start investing is using a platform like Sharesies or Stake or Hatch or any of the local brokers in combination with either of these stock screeners, just for the time being anyway.
Awesome. That's actually really great information. I use Sharesies myself, and I think sometimes we get caught up in all Palestinian thing obviously going on. We're boycotting a lot of the also are these also included within Zoya and Musafa?
I believe a lot of them are now. So when it comes to Sharia standards and looking at those investments to determine whether or not they're halal, they don't necessarily include that. However, a lot of these companies have taken that on board and realized that, hey, a lot of people don't want to be investing in companies that are, funding the genocide. So they have explicitly stated that even though they may technically be halal, however, the company's operations are not, in line with what we believe in.
Someone is asking, what is your current portfolio value? I don't know if you'd be comfortable sharing that.
Probably not.
I thought so. Are there any sort of tips or maybe final advice to kind of like encourage us to make our first investment, and like why is it so important for the youth? I know like with the whole, your money's losing its value, for instance, in the bank. Us youth, we're not going to be able to buy property unless it's with mortgage and then and so what are some tips and sort of advice to prep us youth to make sure that we're ready to sort of embark our financial freedom journey?
Yeah, so a lot of I remember being in the same situation and thinking, hey, I don't have that much money. Does it make any sense for me to start investing? If I can only afford to invest $15 a week or $15 a month. And I think starting with that creates some really good financial habits. So what I is no matter what you can afford, even if it's $5 a week, um, start doing that. It kind of creates the habit of investing and learning to set aside money, and also, picking up side hustles and things like that, just to kind of grow that. And as you do that, the more you earn, the more you can set aside. And like you said, it's a lot more difficult for us to be able to afford a house outright because just with the kind of incomes we have at the moment and the way the house prices are going up. So doing this will create good financial habits and hopefully will turn into something that is a bit more substantial um, down the line when you are able to afford a house or whatever your financial goals are.
Um, I guess my final question is, what are some resources that you would recommend to us to sort of like go back um, to increase our financial or like investment knowledge? Or maybe like YouTube channels, obviously your Instagram, guys, everybody go follow him, please. Muslim Investing. But what are some resources of people wanting to read and learn more about investments? What are some of the resources that you can share with us?
A really good resource is Islamic Finance Guru. They're a company based in the UK and they talk a lot about halal investments, but also investing in general. They provide some really good resources. When it comes to just financial resources in general, it's important to note that sometimes the advice and the information in those, like for a book or a video, may not be fully applicable. So I struggle to recommend completely like a finance book because a lot of the advice could be, using high yield savings accounts which involve interest. But organizations like Islamic Finance Guru, are fully Islamic. They've also got a book which teaches you how to start investing. That's a really good resource.
Did you say Islamic Investing Guru?
Islamic Finance Guru.
Finance. Okay, awesome. Thank you. We have another question. When you say side hustles, do you have any recommendations? Also, so $1 every week is better than 20 at once.
Okay, I think that was a passion project that's become a side hustle today. But there are different things you can do, copywriting for websites, marketing, selling things on the side. It could be just selling things on Facebook. Um, there's a lot of different recommendations there. And in terms of investing $1, I would say it's difficult to kind of say one's better than the other, but more so what you can manage. And setting up an automatic $1 a week, for example, or $5 a week, and forgetting about it is a good way to just let those investments just kind of do their thing.
Awesome. Jazakallah khair. This will be our final two questions. What advice would you give to someone who is keen to start up a financial literacy entrepreneurial journey?
I mean, just do it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you could do a bunch of research and speak to people in the industry, see if it's something you want to be doing. But yeah, ultimately just start.
Awesome. And what inspired you to embark on your Muslim investing entrepreneurial journey? And how do you ensure that your investment activities align with Islamic principles?
Yeah, so I was, I was really passionate about investing and I wasn't completely sure when I started investing what was halal and what wasn't. And when I did a bunch of research, it was all just long form articles and books. And I wanted a page that I would have liked to have come to and seen information that was relatable to me, easily digestible. And that's why I started with Muslim investing and just speaking to friends and family and people around me. I saw a definite need for that. And that's why I started Muslim investing. And how do I ensure? I mean, using halal stock screeners and managing my investments. It's a constant just checking up, making sure those investments are halal, and I kind of just do that to make sure they ensure align with Islamic principles.
Jazakallah kul khair. I'm so sorry. There's another question that came through. This will be the last question for real. What advice can you give a person who is not living in a country where Islamic financing is available? Can you refer any financing platform that will accept you of
Okay.
what? Sorry. I don't does that will accept you of you are not in their country? So I guess
Um,
that goes back to Sharesies and the platforms that you've mentioned before, I assume.
mhm.
Is I think just
Um,
summarize maybe Muhammad, sort of give us the screening applications and the investing applications.
yeah, so screening apps like Zoya, Musaffa, Islamically, um, those are different screening apps that screen for different stock markets around the world. Um, there are a number of different brokers that are available, in every single country. Um, so there should be options if they're referring to like a mortgage or something like that. I would suggest renting or speaking to a scholar to kind of see if there's another option for you in terms of a mortgage or financing.
Awesome. Muhammad, Jazakallah kul khair. And honestly, this has been super insightful. I think Sheikh Shabir is still here as well. So I just want to say thank you guys so much for making the time. We really appreciate it. I think we don't really get those opportunities that often. So we really appreciate you making the time and the effort to be here. Um, Also, Muhammad, please let us know when you're in New Zealand. We would love to host you and maybe actually get in some more practical tips in person and maybe doing our first investment or our second, third, or whatever investment with you. So please let us know when you're back in the country. But Sheikh and Muhammad, thank you so much for being here. And if there are any questions, we'll let you know. We're not rushing you or anything. Please take your time. But I'm going to close for the day if no one has any further questions. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Oh,
Jazakallah kul khair.
oh my God.